relationship you choose. So let's say you have problems in your relationship and you decide to stay in a relationship. Well, it really depends on the type of problems that you had in your relationship. There are specific things you can do. So the first thing is that, let's say you actually break up with someone. You don't break up with someone, but you have a bad argument and you're trying to decide whether you want to break up with them or not. So how do you rebuild your relationship after an argument? One thing that you would do is, so there's several things you can do. There's 6 tips, actually. The first thing you would do is you would choose to regain your respect. If you have an argument with someone, when you argue with a person, with your partner, usually what happens is that hurtful words are exchanged, and it's always a focus on like who's right or wrong. But it shouldn't be about that. It should be about what is the real problem underneath the argument. What did you really need and want from your partner? One tip after an argument is to regain your respect. And how do you do that? You have to pay more attention to how you feel about what happened and pay attention to the other person's behavior and your reactions. So the other person's behavior and your reactions to their behaviors. You have to regain your respect by talking to them and getting your point across, but also allowing the other person to explain their point. Because the reality is that when you're in a relationship, it's not only about how you feel, it's also about how the other person feels. The problem is that when you have an argument, there's a lot of going back and forth and, like I said before, proving who's right or wrong. When an argument even starts is because there's something that you needed from your partner to do or say and they didn't do it. A lot of times in relationships, we actually think that our partners are psychic. They know what we want. And the reality is that they don't know what we want. Even if we're together for a long time, even though they know us very well, they still may not know what we want in that moment or what we need in that moment. So you have to be able to express that. Choose to regain your respect in the right way. A lot of times they say, well, somebody has to compromise. I don't always agree with the word compromise, because compromise means you give up something and you take on what the other person wants. But that may not work for you because you're suppressing your own feelings and what you want. So in other words, you have to negotiate. The real true definition of compromise is you have to negotiate. Well, I'll do this for you right now, but you have to do this for me later. And so the reality is that if you do that, then you compromise effectively. But you both end up getting what you want. And so remember that it's not just you giving up something for somebody else. That is not good enough for anybody in a relationship. And eventually it catches up to you. Because eventually, if you keep giving up things for the other person, you eventually will be frustrated because you're not getting what you need or want in the relationship. The second tip after an argument to restore the relationship is set a heartfelt intention. So before the next conversation, be clear with your expectations and what you want to see happen. If the argument is over somebody forgot to pay a bill, let's say as an example. The argument is you forget to pay the bill all the time. Well, maybe that person is a forgetful person. I mean, the reality is that there's always one person in the relationship that is better at managing bills and paying the bills. And you have to always figure that out and give one person the responsibility. That's a whole nother conversation for another time about healthy relationships and budgeting and finances. But you have to set your expectations very clear. If you expect someone to do something for you, you have to share, like, can you pay this bill tomorrow after you get off work, before you come home? You have to be very clear on what you want. If not, then the person says, if you just say, can you pay this bill? All right, so it's not an urgency. If you just say, can you pay this bill? They may forget the next day, and then they'll say, oh, I forgot to do that, but you know what? I'll do it the next day. And then it doesn't get paid. So you have to be very careful and mindful that when you're asking for something from your partner that you actually can do it. So some more tips. Don't judge or try to stop people from feeling their emotions. It's important to hear the person out, even if you don't agree with them, and summarize what they tell you. So it's kind of like rephrasing and reframing what they're telling you, just to let the other person know, I'm hearing you, I'm listening. Plus, the other person should do the same with you. But this is about you right now and how you can restore the relationship after an argument. The second regulate your reactions. So you have to know yourself enough. So like me, I'm very defensive, especially if I feel like I have to protect myself. So in my relationship, I may become very defensive, ready to fight and argue once I get criticized or I say something and they come back with something and challenging my thought process. I could become defensive. So you have to regulate your own reactions. Make sure that you kind of de-escalate yourself. And there's different ways you can do that. I mean, to de-escalate yourself, you can do self-talk in your head where you say, you know what, calm down. For me, I would say, Kyisha, cut it out. Listen to what he's saying. And you can do the same thing. Listen to what your partner's saying and then just calm down. Another tip is don't take it personally or don't be so defensive, because that's the worst thing you can say when you have an argument with someone. Don't take it personal. It is personal because you're in a relationship with the person. Of course it's personal. So you want to make sure that you be careful on word selection. Now, do you have to filter? Because this is the other thing. I was having a conversation with someone the other day and they said they feel like that they have to walk on eggshells with the person they're with and that they have to filter every time they're having a conversation. I told them, do not do that. Because the more you filter, we have to filter for the world. When we go to work, we have to filter. We have to be careful what we say, what we do. Around certain family members, we have to be careful what we say, what we do, because we don't want to be disrespectful. And in our culture, it is very disrespectful if you talk back to a person who is elderly. So I would say be careful with your words, but be true to yourself. So if you're angry, be angry and say, I'm mad right now. I need a moment. And I'll come and explain to you why later. So sometimes you have to take a break. I personally put myself in timeout all the time. I have sometimes a little bit of anger issues, or I'm very self-defensive. So, and that happened because throughout my whole life, I've had to defend myself and protect myself. So because of that, I've been very independent. So now being in a relationship with someone, that still comes out. Even though you know that person's not really out to hurt you, you hope. But words are hurtful sometimes and you can become defensive. Your comfort zone response comes out. So we all have a response that we use that's very comfortable for us when we are put in an uncomfortable situation. If you're in an uncomfortable argument or an uncomfortable situation with your partner, you're going to revert to your comfort response. And that just means whatever that is. Some of us shut down, some of us argue, some of us get angry, some of us isolate ourselves, some of us totally avoid and go do something else and spend time with other people just to avoid even talking. Be mindful of you and how you respond and your reactions, and that way be true to yourself. Just make sure you're not hurtful. If you're angry, you're angry. Every emotion, you're allowed to have emotions in a relationship. And it's not that you should not have emotions. It's about how does your emotions affect the other person and affect you. And it's important that you understand that. How do I feel about apologizing? Apologizing is another way to, restore the relationship after an argument. It's okay to apologize. What I would tell you is that only apologize for the things that you believe are wrong or the things that you can take ownership for only. So don't apologize and say, I'm sorry for us arguing. No, because if you were upset about something, you were upset. It's okay to be upset. People get upset in relationships. I was listening to something the other day. I think it was on the Drew Barrymore show in the morning. And I don't really watch that show, but I was changing the channel. And there was a couple up there that had been married for over 50 years. Phil Donahue. Some of you might be younger, so you don't know who these people are, but Phil Donahue and his wife Marlo, they were talking about what has helped them last in their relationship. How are they still happily married 50 plus years later? Well, the one thing, they said two things that were important. One was they never go to bed angry. So they try to resolve any conflict or argument before they go to bed. That's one. Number two, they both wanted the relationship to work. So they both worked at it. My point is that the two people together, or more, depending on what you prefer, the people in a relationship must want to be in that relationship, and they both have to put effort into it regularly. So it's not like you put effort into it now and then it's gonna be perfect for the rest of your life. That's not true. You're gonna have problems, you're gonna have ups and downs, and you're gonna have to deal with these things. Life keeps happening around us. There's loss, there's life changes, there's grief. We change, our goals change, the things we like change. If you ever noticed, there's things you used to like to eat when you were young that you probably don't like to eat now, or vice versa. Just pay attention to those things, because the reality is that if you want a relationship to work, you can make it work. So after an argument is really pretty simple. You just sit down, you control your reactions, and you express yourself and what you need, and allow for your partner to share what they need. Now, how do you restore a relationship that's damaged by anger? Like, one person is constantly angry. So the first was after an argument, how do you restore your relationship? Now this is after anger, how do you restore your relationship? Well, one is apologize if you knew you were wrong. Now, if the other person is wrong and was angry with you, you have to figure out a way to express that to them. You have to figure out a way to have them understand where you're coming from and understand why you were upset. There is something called conflict first aid. This is very interesting. Conflict first aid, it's like kind of when you get hurt, you have a first aid box and you need a Band-Aid, you clean it up or whatever. This is conflict first aid for restoring relationships. And there's 3 things that you do. And it's very interesting. So the important thing is to protect what's important and prevent harm and restore your relationship. So the first of the 3 first aid tips is put your own oxygen mask on first. Now they're making it an analogy, but the reality is that putting on your own oxygen mask on first is you dealing with yourself first. So when conflict occurs, everybody gets hurt, because even though one person may begin the conflict, if conflict continues, then you both are participating. So it becomes worse and worse. We become defensive or angry, emotions start flying, hurtful words, logic goes out the window, because remember, we have our emotional side of our brain and our logical side of our brain. When our emotional side of our brain begins to overwork, it becomes irrational, over-exaggerated, crying, upset, saying hurtful things. Now, you don't have to do all those things. That's examples of different things that could possibly happen. We react in unhelpful ways to the argument or the conflict. The situation deteriorates and misunderstanding multiplies times like 5. So where you started about a conversation, an argument over here, then it maximizes and get bigger. And we all have been in those situations where, wait a minute, we were just arguing about what we're eating for breakfast, and now we're talking about how our whole relationship is horrible. So we have to be careful with that. Putting your own oxygen mask on first, it is compared to, how you're in the air in a plane and you have the air safety instructions. You're told to put the oxygen mask on first before you actually help somebody else, so that you can survive and think clearly while you're getting your oxygen. So then that way you're able to help someone else effectively put their mask on. To restore relationships, you have to think the same way. You have to get your mind to be clear so you can address your own needs. So how do you do that? How do you put your oxygen mask on first? Well, first is acknowledge. You take a few deep breaths, take some time out, and acknowledge your pain. Think about what the relationship means to you and how important it is to restore it. Think what you need to move on and range of options that you have, the different solutions. That's number 1. So acknowledge. So this is under part 1 of the conflict first aid, which is putting your oxygen mask on. The first step is to acknowledge. The second is assess. Write out what happened or talk to someone you trust to give honest feedback. What could you have done differently? Were your assumptions valid? What else might have been behind the other person's behavior? How could you improve the situation now? The third piece to this is accept. So take responsibility for what you did, only for what you did. That's the only thing you could be responsible for, or the things you said that might have contributed to the conflict. Remember, if both persons are in conflict, that means they're both participating. And in some way or another, it doesn't matter who has the bigger participation in the conflict, you're still participating in it. So accept your responsibility and what you contributed to the conflict, and accept that the other person might not want to talk or restore the relationship. You don't know where the other person's at in this situation. It may take time. So realize that you can't change the other person. Remember, the first part of conflict first aid is you giving yourself oxygen first. You taking care of yourself first. So acknowledge, assess, accept. And the fourth piece in you having your own oxygen mask on first is to act. So the fourth is acting. So generally ignoring a problem in a relationship doesn't work. Ignoring anything. If people tell you to ignore something, that is not going to work. It is a temporary Band-Aid fix, and eventually that thing is going to come up and it's going to explode. Have you ever boiled milk before? You know what happens with boiled milk on the stove? I'm not going to tell you what happens. I want you to try that for homework. Try to boil milk and see what happens. That's what happens with your emotions if you ignore it and ignore it. I'll tell you next week what happened. But act. Number 4 was act. Don't wait for the other person to make the first move. You make the first move and you start having the difficult conversations. Just remember, you got to make sure you acknowledge, assess, accept, and act. So you can make the first move and actually start the difficult conversation. Let's say you do that and the other person is not ready. So take a step back and give them space, because you don't want to push a person and then it becomes more conflict. So be very careful not to push, because people have different personalities. Depending on the personality, some people want to resolve conflict right away, while another person is not ready to resolve conflict right away. You can't force people to do things your way. You have to be able to do it where both people are considered, all right? The second conflict first aid step is to apologize. You're having conflict. You're thinking, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't start the conflict. I didn't start the argument. I didn't start the problems in the relationship. Yeah, but if you go back to step 1, it talks about you putting your own oxygen mask on. While it's not your fault, you still have to acknowledge what you did, access and accept responsibility for the part you played in contributing to the conflict, and act on it. Even though it wasn't your fault, you still participate in the conflict. Keep that in mind. Even though you may not have started the argument or conflict, you still participated. You can apologize for your part only. Not, as I said earlier, you don't apologize for everything. You only apologize for what you did wrong. The third step in the conflict first aid is do what you say you will. So be realistic about what you can offer to put things right. If you can't do anything to put things right, be honest about it. Say, I don't know how to make this right. I don't know. We keep getting an argument about the same thing over and over, and I don't know how to make this right. And maybe the other person might have suggestions or ideas. The worst thing you could do is commit to something that you can't fulfill, or make a promise that you can't keep. So you have to be very careful, because that actually does more harm than good. So again, conflict first aid in order to restore relationships. Number 1, put your own oxygen mask on first. So take care of yourself first after a conflict, which is acknowledge, assess, accept, act. Number 2, apologize only for the part that you played and the things you did and said. And number 3, do what you say you will. Commit to the things that you actually can follow through on, okay? So how to rescue a damaged relationship. This is based off of breach of trust. If your relationship has been damaged, let's say you're in a relationship, you've been happy, the relationship's been healthy, then all of a sudden you start feeling like the person broke your trust. And broken trust comes in different forms. It's not only cheating, and we talked about cheating a couple weeks ago, but cheating is not the only way that you break trust. There's many ways. If your partner's sneaking and spending money after you guys had made decisions financially together, and one person is sneaking to do things, breach of trust comes in many forms. It's not just one thing. But let's say that you feel like your partner breached your trust. There are at least 22 ways that you can rescue your relationship that has been damaged because of breach of trust. One way is take full responsibility if you're at fault. If you're the problem and you're the one who breached the trust, then you need to take full responsibility. Number 2, give your partner the opportunity to win your trust back. As I said before, if you decide that you want the relationship to be restored and rebuilt, then you have to give your partner the opportunity to rebuild that trust. Number 3, practice radical transparency. This one's very interesting. Instead of bottling up emotions, radical transparency, it involves getting it all out there. Even if you feel a bit silly or self-conscious about admitting certain things. There's some things, sometimes we don't like, a lot of times people, once your trust is breached, you don't want to feel vulnerable again. And so instead you just try to protect yourself. The problem with that is that you're not being your true self. So you need to make sure that you open up and allow for a moment of radical transparency. So raw truth where you can share exactly how you feel, no matter big or small. The 4th tip here says you could seek professional help, like couples therapy, or even like if you're religious, there's counselors within the church or a pastor that can meet with you. So it depends what you feel is professional help and guidance. Number 5, extend compassion and care to the person you hurt. Let's say that the other person was the one who breached your trust. It doesn't matter if they breach your trust. Do you extend compassion to them? No, they should be extending compassion and care to you. But if you're the person who hurt your partner, then you can extend compassion and care to the other person. You have to also be careful not to feel shame and guilt, because the reality is that when you hurt someone else, sometimes you feel really guilty about it. And instead of falling into that spiral and black hole of guilt and shame, do something about it, basically. Make the person feel better from the hurt that you caused. Now, let's say you're in a long distance relationship. Those are very hard. Being physically apart is really rough on a relationship. Nowadays, with this pandemic, a lot of people are meeting via social media and the internet, and actually and through apps. So that's how they're starting to date. So they don't physically see each other right away. There are several things that you need to do to manage the relationship differently to make sure that it survives. So one is manage expectations. So there should be ground rules. There should be boundaries and expectations of when you're going to communicate, what are you going to do for quality time, because you're going to have to use internet, social media, or video, or Zoom, or phone to even spend quality time with each other. Another thing you could do is have regularly scheduled visits, set aside time for online dates. Don't let your world revolve around your partner. I mean, that's true for long distance and relationships that are not long distance. Your whole world shouldn't revolve around your partner. Now, you and your partner should know everything about each other and communicate regularly, know what's going on. But what I'm saying is that you shouldn't be stuck underneath each other and expect that everything you do, you have to do together, because that's not healthy. You each have to have your own individual lives and be able to spend quality time with each other. But you have to have me time too, time for yourself to do things that you want to do. And you have to trust that when your partner is spending time doing something else, that is not because they don't want to be with you. But if your trust is breached, you have to communicate and create expectations and boundaries, so that way you can know that your partner really does want to spend time with you, or does want to spend time alone, or does want to spend time with their family, and not just avoid you or not want to be with you or be with somebody else. You can't assume the worst. In order to avoid you assuming the worst, communication is important. So again, set expectations and set boundaries. You should have a weekly couples meeting just to discuss any important things that are happening that week, any important bills that you need to pay, or any important family get together that is going to happen. You should have like a weekly conversation. It doesn't have to be like a formal meeting. It could be just a check-in, like, hey, anything important happening this week? Or you could put a calendar on the wall and each of you put any important dates and stuff going on. Another tip is to learn to compromise. We talked about compromising again, so we're not going to get into that again. Another, spend time with friends outside of your relationship. Yep, we just talked about that. You always need physical contact. Now, some people are more physical than others. A few weeks ago, I talked about your love language, and there's still a post that I have about love language. There's 5 love language, and the link to the quiz is there if you want to take it. If you know your love language, some of you may have a love language that it's important to have physical touch. Some of you, that might not be your love language, so you're not going to want to touch each other all the time. But you still need romance and you still need intimacy. So make sure that you communicate what you need to your partner. After you've had a big fight, what can you do? Well, communication, and that can be a whole nother talk that I will do in a few weeks. How to communicate effectively in your relationship. Another is speak from your heart. So always be true. Like I said earlier, don't filter yourself, because the person you're with is going to be with you good, bad, and indifferent. So it doesn't matter if they agree with your tone or what you're saying. They're going to accept who you are. So speak frankly on how you feel. It's going to be very important that you're true to yourself. Another is actively listen. So actively listening is not just hearing what they're saying. Actively listening means you're hearing what they're saying, you're taking it in, and you're understanding where they're coming from. Even if you don't agree with it, it's still important for you to listen and take it in. Not listen and while they're talking, you're already in your head talking about what question you're going to ask them, or what comment you're going to say, or what thing you're going to challenge from what they're saying, because that's not actively listening. That's you are hearing them, and it's going out another ear because you're already thinking about what you're going to respond to them. That's not okay. Don't do that when you're talking to your partner, because it's not helpful, and it does seem like you're not paying attention when you do that. So actively listen, please. And then break the pattern. That means that figure out opportunities, defining rules and boundaries throughout your relationship. You do it in the beginning, you set expectations you're supposed to. Most people don't. They just think that it's an unspoken language. Like when you meet somebody and you decide to be together, you automatically know what you want or don't want, or what's appropriate and not appropriate. Like when you meet somebody for the first time, do you talk to them about what your expectations are on social media? If they should talk to exes or friends? Is it okay for them to have friendship with the opposite sex? These are all things that are important to people in a relationship. And if you don't talk about it and actually outline your expectations and the boundaries around it, then it's going to come out sooner or later and you're going to bump heads if you're not on the same page. So break the pattern by throughout your relationship, from the beginning, in the middle, when you have problems, throughout your relationship, defining and redefining rules and expectations and boundaries. It's going to be really important to do it throughout your relationship, like forever. And all that is communicating what you need and what you want. It's very important. Another way is say thank you for the small things. You know, your partner will try to make up for the things they've done by doing little small things. Acknowledge those things. Say thank you. Even if it's small thing, even if it's like, so what, they took the trash out. No, that's important. Acknowledge when they do something, because that only builds their confidence in the relationship and their ability to want to continue to do things in the relationship and for you. Have fun together. That sounds so kind of corny and like little, but we forget to do that. Sometimes we just are so focused on responsibilities and work and day-to-day things and family and crisis and all these things that we forget to just sit and have fun with each other. Truthfully, fun, laugh. It could be a movie. It could be just eating dinner together. It could be talking about crazy aunt that acts up all the time and you bumped into them in a store or something. It could be anything. So just have fun together. Basic tip for a relationship. And the last thing and the most important thing in restoring a relationship that's struggling is maintain intimacy and communication. No matter what, it's easy for people to say, well, you know what? I'm not going to let them touch me, or I'm not giving them anything because I'm mad at them. It's easy to say that, and it's easy to do that. But that just makes the relationship worse. So you have to maintain communication and you have to maintain intimacy. It's the only way your relationship is going to be rebuilt. So don't withhold things. Anyway, that's really petty, by the way. I'm mad at them, so I'm not cooking dinner right now. And I only know it's petty because I've been there before. You know, we've all done it where we're mad, so we're going to take something away. We do it with kids, too. It's not okay, though. We shouldn't do that with adults. It's different for kids. We have to teach them. They have to earn everything in life. With adults, you have to be very careful because they're not kids. Sometimes we treat our partner like a kid, and they're not our kid. They're supposed to be our partner, making decisions and living life together. Let's say a relationship is near its end. You want to rebuild it, but it's broken. It's really broken. How do you rebuild it? Research shows that there are about 15 ways. The first is initiate a friendly and polite dialogue. As polite as can be, because the reality is that when you're angry, you may not want to be too polite. Just tone it down. Remember I said earlier that you have to regulate yourself. And remember I said that we always turn to our comfort response when we're in an uncomfortable situation, when we're angry. Like for me, my comfort response is anger, unfortunately. But you have to self-regulate. So initiate a friendly and polite dialogue. So sit and talk about expectations and talk about what you want. And if you want to rebuild a broken relationship, you say that. You talk to them about rebuilding the broken relationship and see if they want the same thing. Because remember I said, in order for a relationship to last and be healthy and happy, both people have to work at it. They both have to put effort into it. How much effort each person puts into it, that matters only in the details of, like, if I did more harm, then I have to put more effort into it. You should put equal effort. If the person did more harm, like say one person cheated, that person has to make amends and rebuild trust with the other person. But that's not more effort. That's additional. That's separate than effort. So your effort into the relationship should be every day, what you're doing for each other, what you're saying to each other, how you treat each other, how important you make the person in your life. That's the effort. The rest of it is above and beyond effort. Okay? So just keep that in mind, because you each have to put your same amount of effort. Okay? 2, be clear about your intentions. What if your intentions are to rebuild and restore the relationship? Then that's what you should be talking about. Make sure, like I said, that the other person is on the same page as you. If they are on the same page as you, then continue the conversation. Come up with some ways that you guys can do things differently. Talk about the top 3 at least things that are of utmost priority that you need to fix in the relationship. Start with 3. There may be more than 3, but start with 3, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself and then you can't follow through. Remember, The worst thing you can do is try to do too much to fix a relationship and then everything fails because you can't follow through on your commitment. But be clear about your intentions, okay? Number 3, love is all you need. I don't know if I believe that. It's important that you love the person, but you know what's more important than loving a person is respecting and valuing them, truthfully. You could love a person. I know people that love each other, and one person is constantly being disrespectful and cheating on the other person and constantly dismissing them. And that's not okay. But that's the way they love. So remember, I talked about this maybe last week or the week before. We learn how to love others by who? I'll give you a hint. When we're children, we're born, we learn from our parents. So if we learn from our parents and our parents show us how to love and it's not really as healthy, then that's what we learned. And so we're going to continue the same thing. Some people, that's how they show love, by yelling and arguing or by cheating or by, it's not okay though. And so that's why I say this one says love is all you need. I don't think it's only love you need. You need respect and value. You need to feel valued and appreciated. You need to feel that you're being respected by your partner. And you have to be respectful towards your partner. Number 4, build a bridge and get over it. That's so funny. People say that all the time. I know it's not easy to do that. I wouldn't even say that that's a good tip. Now, again, I'm sharing with you what research says are 15 ways to rebuild a broken relationship. And I'm going to be honest when I say stuff. I don't know about the build a bridge and get over it. Because some things you can't get over on your own. You need the other person to do some things in order for you to get over it. The only way you can get over somebody cheating on you is if they stop cheating and they make amends and they make up for all the pain and hurt. That's the only way. You can't just get over it. That's not simple. You were hurt. Another tip, number 5, be honest. It says in a nice way. Well, I would say instead of being in a nice way, be honest in your way, in your language. Like me, I'm going to be honest in Kyisha's language. The way I would say things, the way I would respond. You have to be honest and true to yourself. But be honest with your partner on how you feel. And even when you don't agree. And it's okay not to agree. You're not going to always agree. The beauty of being in a healthy relationship is that you can actually both have different opinions and share them and still be respectful and loving to each other. Absolutely. You don't have to be on the same page. Now, there's important things that you have to be absolutely be on the same page. How to raise your children, making sure you pay your bills. Everything else is really negotiable. Your expectations and boundaries, that you have to be on the same page too. Number 6, brainstorming. It says invite the other person in attempts to come up with ways how to rebuild your relationship. Both of you should brainstorm together. Number 7, it says here release control, meaning you do not have to be in control of everything. You do not have to make all the decisions for everything. If you're in a relationship and you are the only one making decisions continuously on that relationship and what you guys are going to do or not do, then that's not good. Both people should be involved in making decisions. So you have to release control. Sometimes there's one person who loves to be in control. I had control issues. Like I said, I took care of myself my whole life. So me being independent, I had to learn to protect myself to the point where I had to be in control of everything. When I did something, when I didn't do something, how much I made, who I'm spending time with, I had to control everything. So in a relationship, you have to release control. And releasing control doesn't mean that the other person has power over you. It means that you're allowing them to make decisions. It's a little different. I'm not saying in an abusive relationship, releasing control is a power dynamic, and that's an issue. So we'll talk about that another Sunday, not today. But releasing control and rebuilding a relationship just means that you're not the only person making decisions, and that's okay. Number 8, apologize. Again, only apologize for what you did, what you agree and accept and acknowledge that you did. Take responsibility for your stuff only in the relationship. Number 9, take responsibility. Okay, I said that already. Number 10, avoid pushing buttons, because we know when you're close with someone and you're in a relationship, it is easy to push buttons. It's easy to get them upset. So you have to be careful with that. Number 11, think positive. Now this is, again, if you're on the same page, you both want to rebuild a relationship. Number 12, be genuine. So no matter what, be your real self. I can never stress that enough. Do not change who you are. Be your real self. Number 13, enforce your boundaries. If you have boundaries, like for instance, one boundary I've always had is that a person should never be friends with their ex. We talked about this too a couple weeks ago. It's not healthy to be friends with your ex. So in my relationship, that's what I would enforce. You can't have a relationship with your ex, which means that I can't have a relationship with my ex either. Neither one of us can. So number 14, keep steering the conversation. So no matter where the conversation goes, keep moving forward towards your goals, towards making decisions, brainstorming ideas on how to make each other happy, do things better, set goals together. You should have financial goals, each your own individual goals. Like if I want to do my own business, I want to write a book. If they want to write a book, or if they want to go back to college, or they want to change a career, always talk about what goals you have individually and together in a relationship. And the last one, sometimes you have to let go. Sometimes attempting to rebuild your relationship, in all the best intentions in the world, there's a chance the other person simply doesn't want to reconnect or rebuild, follow through on all the ideas and things that you've come up with, all the problems in your relationship, and fixing it. In the end, you can try everything to rebuild. As long as both of you want it and both put effort into it, it can be done. If one person is not putting full effort or is inconsistent, because that's the other issue. One moment they're putting effort, another moment they're not. If there's inconsistency, what you have to know is that when you're faced with that decision and you've given all you can and you're still not happy and the other person's still not happy, the choice is no longer if you're going to stay with that person or break up. The choice is, are you important enough? Do you love yourself enough that you want better? Or you want more? Or you want something that can meet your needs and what you want in life? So just remember that the person that you're with has to put effort into the relationship, just like you have to put effort. If that doesn't happen and you're not happy, then you really have to make a decision on what you want to do and whether or not that person is going to fulfill those things. And you communicate that. If they're not willing to, or they don't follow through on it, or they're inconsistent, then you have to just let it go. You have to walk away. The reality is that it's never an easy decision staying or going. It's always a hard thing breaking up with somebody after a long time. But what's important is that you're always happy. You're expressing what you need. And if the other person is not fulfilling it, that's not on you, that's on them. It's obvious that they don't want to make you happy. So you have to decide for yourself. I want you guys to know how important it is for you to have a healthy relationship with other people, but even more so to have a healthy relationship with yourself. So you stop sacrificing yourself to make everybody else happy and then you're not happy. So be mindful of that. Ultimately, it's about you being happy, not just making other people happy. And that's my goal, is to help you guys get to a place where you are making yourself happy and you are doing the things that you want to do in your life. Relationship issues, we can talk about all those things. We could talk about friendships, we could talk about anything. There are a lot of other things on the list. Questions were sent to me, but for today, it was just about restoring and rebuilding your relationship. And if you need any more tips, or you have questions, or you have problems, please just inbox me and I will get to you. Thank you for listening again today, and I will be here again next Sunday, and I will be talking about relationships and how to find the right partner. What are the components of attraction? Like, if you meet somebody, how do you know that that person is going to be good for you or not? I'm going to give you some tips next week on that, because that's going to be important to you when you meet new people and when you're in your honeymoon phase of getting to know each other throughout that first year or two, so you can determine whether or not you should be with them or not. As always, thank you. This was Real Talk Live. See you next week.